In today's video, we have a variety of NHL news I want to discuss, including the fact that today is the deadline for restricted free agents Julius, Honka, and Jesse Puljujarvi to get NHL deals so they can actually play this season. We also have a small NHL trade to discuss, plus trade talk is really heating up on the Taylor Hall front. Who are the potential suitors and what might a deal look like? We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to cover today, and I want to kick things off with a minor trade that took place yesterday between the Detroit Red Wings and Arizona Coyotes organization. The Arizona Coyotes have shipped goaltender Eric Comrie to the Detroit Red Wings in exchange for prospect Vili Puljujarvi. Now, this might seem like a pretty minor deal, but of course the Red Wings ran into a sticky situation with goaltending the other day with Jonathan Bernier being very sick and then Jimmy Howard being injured. They really don't have a lot of goaltending depth within the organization. It's certainly not an area of strength for that team. Not to say that they have a lot of areas of strength right now. The Red Wings are having a mightily struggling season, but I guess we'll see. Hopefully they can end up with a really high pick and it'll help them come out of this. But for the time being, Eric Comrie's been playing in the American Hockey League. He's been a prospect goaltender for some time. Certainly has been times where he's looked like to have a promising future. Maybe he'll get more of an opportunity with the Red Wings, and we'll see what he can do. But he's been playing well so far this year in the AHL for the Coyotes organization, so I guess we will see. But obviously, Eric Comrie over to the Red Wings. Now, as I mentioned as well, today is December the 1st, so that makes that today at 5 o'clock Eastern is the deadline for Edmonton Oilers forward Jesse Puljujarvi or Dallas Stars defenseman Julius Honka to sign an NHL contract to be able to play this season. Of course, last year around this time, it was the William Nylander watching the whole saga with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Would he sign? Would he sit? Would he be traded? And it's the same scenario again this year with these two players, except it seems extremely unlikely that they will sign with their existing teams. Both players have requested a trade for some time now. It's just a matter of each team trying to find the right deal so that they can accommodate that. Now, for Jesse Puljujarvi and Julius Honka, both been playing overseas. Jesse Puljujarvi's agent has made it known that the player is quite content to stay over and finish the season in Finland where he's been playing, and that may even be the case even if he is traded. It's not a guarantee that he would actually end up signing an NHL contract and coming back to North America to the NHL for the remainder of the current season. So, I mean, he's doing well over in Finland. Things have been going pretty well. He certainly seems to be finding his game and really building up his confidence. So, probably realistically isn't his best interest to stay over there and finish strong. And maybe, for the Oilers' sake too, to really get a better deal for him maybe next offseason. It seems like him and his agent are not, going back on the fact that they want out of Edmonton. They want to be traded to a different organization for a fresh start. So, I guess we will see how that goes. In Julius Honka's case, the Dallas Stars been looking to try to accommodate a trade as well. There hasn't been any offers, obviously, as of yet that they've been satisfied with. I wouldn't think it would take a whole lot to pry Honka out of Dallas. I mean, he's a player that was drafted with a lot of potential and really hasn't quite developed to be able to grab a regular spot with the Stars, and really for the most part has had limited opportunity. So it's still a little bit of a project, likely in my opinion is what I would refer to it as. There's certainly plenty of teams that probably could take a chance on him. Would it only take maybe a second round pick, maybe another prospect that might be struggling for a swap, something like that? I could see the possibility of Honka maybe being traded today, but Puljujarvi, I think the odds are lower, but I guess we will see. But certainly by tomorrow, we'll certainly know for sure, or by this evening, we'll have a 100% guarantee of what their futures hold for this season, if they'll be in the NHL or not. Now, the big topic on Saturday headlines on Hockey Night in Canada with Elliot Friedman and Chris Johnson is the big Taylor Hall watch. Apparently, they're both indicating that Taylor Hall trade talks have heated up quite a bit, with New Jersey Devils general manager Ray Shero apparently fielding several calls. They went through and took a look at who they felt were the most likely contenders and suitors for Taylor Hall and what kind of made sense to their opinion as well, where he might end up. But it's safe to say at this point with New Jersey and the way their season is going, that really I do think the odds of him being traded are pretty good. It's another year out of the playoffs likely for New Jersey, with his agent Darren Ferris having a reputation for not doing in-season contracts and making the player wait as long as possible to maximize their return. At least in his opinion, that's the best way to do it. It does seem unlikely that he would sign an extension with New Jersey, and I don't know if they're going to want to go through with another situation like we saw the Islanders go through with John Tavares. I think ever since that Tavares situation took place and he left town, I think teams are a lot more cautious and kind of protective of their organization on that front going forward. So doesn't mean they couldn't potentially look to re-sign him as a free agent in the summer like everybody else. That is a possibility, but I guess we'll see what happens, because Taylor Hall's main objective is he wants to be on a team that can compete and be a competitive playoff team year after year. He's getting later into his career now. He's had very limited playoff games and really is looking to change that and wants to be with an organization who can put a winning product on the ice consistently. New Jersey has struggled to do that the past few years. Even with all the moves they made last offseason, many of us thought they would do better this year, but so far things have just not come together for that organization. So where are the most likely destinations for Taylor Hall to end up? Now, I know in the last few days we've discussed the potential rumors of Taylor Hall to Montreal. I think most of that is being fueled by NHL insiders who indicate that they feel Montreal is looking to make a big acquisition, that they could have sources indicating that that is to be the case. Of course, Taylor Hall would be the biggest or one of the biggest names who could potentially be moved between now and the NHL trade deadline. As we've mentioned before, the Habs are well positioned between assets when it comes to draft picks, prospects, and salary cap space to make this kind of move, so they're certainly well situated that way. And I know TSN insider Darren Dreger had indicated that based on his knowledge of the situation and his own personal opinion, he felt that Taylor Hall would be a player who would consider signing longer term in Montreal. I know some players kind of shy away from certain markets, especially Canadian markets like Toronto, Montreal, that are kind of hockey hotbeds where not only playing on the ice with the fans but the media, there's a lot of pressure that comes with it, and it's a whole different beast than playing in a more low-key market where you don't get quite the attention. But Taylor Hall is used to that. He played in Edmonton for a long time. He knows what it's like to be, from Canada, play in Canada, and I don't think he'd be the type of player to shy away from that spotlight, that attention, and everything that comes with it. So that's why he felt Taylor Hall in Montreal could very well be a good fit. And as we know, the Habs are that one spark, that one big forward away, really, I think, from taking the team, big time in the right direction. Of course, lately their defensive play and goaltending haven't been great, so that obviously needs to be improved and addressed as well. But from an offensive perspective, at least, I think a player like Taylor Hall would be an absolutely huge improvement for that organization. Now, let's take a quick look here at CapFriendly.com's space for the Montreal Canadiens to see what they have to offer here. As you can see, the Montreal Canadiens have ample space, well over $5 million right now. They have, like I said, all kinds of draft picks. They have 8 draft picks in the first 4 rounds coming up in the 2020 draft. They have all kinds of interesting prospects, and some, I guess you can kind of still somewhat consider them prospects that are playing on their main roster right now. They got Kotkaniemi, they got Nick Suzuki, of course there's Ryan Poehling, you got Romanov over in Russia, you got Caden Primo, who's a star goaltender, you got Cole Caulfield, who's playing college hockey, their top pick from 2019, who looks to be a pretty solid player as well. You got Cale Fleury in the back end. They have lots of youth that the other teams would be interested in, and I'm sure that the Devils are likely looking for probably a first-round pick, and our top prospect would be my guess, maybe even a second conditional first-round pick. That's what they discussed in Saturday headlines, that it could be one first-round pick and then a conditional one. So if he re-signs a long-term contract, that the team gets a second first-rounder or something to that effect would likely be included, and possibly a roster player, but more than likely they'd be more interested in futures. If there's a roster player, it's going to have to be a younger roster player who can be with the organization for a long time, possibly even like somebody who's still an RFA, so it's a controllable asset. Now let's take a look at some other potential suitors discussed by Friedman and Johnston here. They also mentioned the Edmonton Oilers, and Elliot Friedman went on to say how he felt like a reunion with the Oilers was a real possibility here. Now, if you take a look at the situation, as much as that would be a great story, and I do think it'd be a great fit, Hall to Edmonton does make some sense. You have general manager Ken Holland, who, in my opinion, I think for the most part has been a little bit more conservative around the trade deadline. I'm not sure after the improvements we've seen this year that he would go out and kind of mortgage the future to add a player at the deadline to really push them into the playoffs further. I mean, you never know, but at the same time, let's take a look at their cap situation. I just think this deal for Edmonton, as much as it might make sense from a roster perspective and be a nice story, that it really doesn't make a lot of sense from a financial perspective. So let's have a quick look here. The Edmonton Oilers right now have $715,000 in cap space. They are very limited in that regards. Now, if you take a look at what they have on their roster, there's a lot of pending unrestricted and restricted free agents right now. They only have 5 forwards under contract for next year, and that includes some big contracts like they have for Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, just to name a few. They also have Alex Chiasson and Puljujarvi. They have some other restricted free agents like Darnell Nurse, who's going to need an extension, and he's played well enough to get a big time, probably a longer time deal and a bit of a raise in my opinion. He's been pretty solid this year. They got Mike Smith on an expiring contract, and Nat Koskinen as well. Is locked up for a shorter term, but still they don't have a long-term outlook on their goaltending situation. So really overall, I think it's going to be a tough deal for the Oilers to pull off. Would they want to, trade a lot of that youth that they've been able to acquire on the blue line? It wasn't that long ago that the Oilers blue line really looked kind of, unpredictable and shaky, but lately, with everything that's developed and what they've acquired in the past year, it's certainly in much better shape. Are they going to want to trade an Evan Bouchard or an Ethan Bear or something to that effect, on that Oilers blue line and give up a first-round pick and maybe another one? I'm just not so sure that it's going to be possible for the Oilers to do that. It would have to be more of a players coming off the roster to make the necessary cap space, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to want to move or have the assets that New Jersey would want in return for Taylor Hall. So as much as I would, probably be fun to see and be a good fit, I just don't know if it makes a lot of sense in other aspects. So personally, if I'm an Oilers fan, I would not be holding my breath on a Taylor Hall return here just yet. Now, a team I've been talking about all along who really makes a lot of sense to me as well, and they've mentioned, is the Colorado Avalanche. Now, the Avalanche have the necessary space. Let's take a look at their cap-friendly page here as well. They have over $5.35 million. They have necessary draft picks to intrigue the Devils, and they have lots of interesting prospects as well. Besides the ones that are on their roster, currently playing right now, they've got a younger defenseman like Connor Timmins. They got Bowen Byram, who went back to junior. They got Shane Bowers, and they have others as well. Like, they have a pretty good crop of prospects, not already impacting this NHL roster right now. Throw in the necessary, draft picks as well that might be necessary, and the cap space and the Avalanche, I think, make a lot of sense. Now, I'm not sure that it makes a good sense on a long-term basis, but at least on a short-term for a playoff run, I could see the Avalanche being well-positioned here. Take a look at the longer-term outlook. Clearly, the Avalanche are pretty well-positioned that way as well, but they're going to have some big-time contracts for some of the younger players coming due, and I'm not sure that longer-term that they would be the best fit. They'd end up doing some finagling as well with some roster moves over the offseason to make it work to keep him in the mix too. Then lastly here, the team discussed was the St. Louis Blues. Now the Blues, of course, are the defending Stanley Cup champions. They're a team who's right now doesn't have a ton of cap space, but they're in a decent position when it comes to other assets. If you take a look at their salary cap space now via capfriendly.com, just to show you what they have available, one piece that might be interesting to the Devils in return possibly might be a goaltender. The Blues have two goaltenders right now making similar amounts of money. Clearly, Jordan Binnington's won the starting position. Jake Allen, former starter, former platooner with them when he had Brian Elliott in the mix, basically been relegated to being a backup, and right now he's been a better backup this year. He's certainly had some good games as of late, but he's an expensive backup, and would they want to have him for a playoff run, or would they consider moving him in a package to make an acquisition here like Hall? Now, of course, that would help enough money go out to do some offsetting of Hall's contract, at least for the current season, so that might be a possibility. Of course, Corey Schneider was recently waived, sent down to the minors. Blackwood's basically left carrying the load. They also have Louis Domingue, so they may not want to be interested in a goaltending upgrade like that. I'm not really sure, but it's something that the Blues probably would at least consider. We have some interesting prospects as well, including players like Jordan Kyrou and Klim Kostin. They have some draft picks in there that could be dangled as well. So certainly the Blues do have the necessary assets, I think, to make a deal. Of course, with Vladimir Tarasenko being out longer term, they can also get some LTIR relief. Based on the extent of his surgery and his injury, he's basically done for the regular season. So that certainly will impact things as well from a cap perspective. So I do think the Blues are well positioned to maybe add a big-time player like Hall to try to go back-to-back and win another Stanley Cup. So let me know what your thoughts are. Who is the most likely team right now that's in the best position and makes the most sense to be able to acquire Taylor Hall, and would they be able to sign him longer term? Give me your mock trades down in the comments and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.